Most businesses only focus on growing and expanding, and they give little to no attention to their exit strategies until after exit is staring them in the face. Learn here at Boosting Business Value, brought to you by Blue Sky Business Resources. You'll discover how to shape a more durable and saleable business, and how to implement a powerful, well-planned, and rewarding exit. Join Dr. David Gruder and Jason Tuzinkewich as they deliver actionable tips for lower middle market company owners, executives, and their trusted advisors. Find out where your business currently stands, how you can meet your revenue objectives more reliably, and how to grow your venture to the next level, all with a smooth and fruitful exit in mind. Here are your hosts, Dr. David and Jason.
Well, welcome to this episode of Boosting Business Value. In this episode, we're doing part 3 of a 3-part kind of mini-series on the 3 teams you need in order to really thrive as a business. And those 3 core teams that help businesses flourish, just as a quick review. In the first part of this series, we covered your life after ownership team. And then in the second part of this mini series, we covered your trusted advisors team. And in this episode, we're going to be exploring the big challenges that effective executive teams face and what to do about these. So for those of you who are new to this Boosting Business Value podcast, I'm David Gruder, the business lifecycle, exit planning, and post-acquisition psychologist for Blue Sky Business Resources. And with me, as always, is the illustrious and talented co-host, Jason Tuzinkewich, Blue Sky's Chief Operations Officer. Take it away, Jason.
Hey, it's great to be with you again, Doctor. And for all of those who are coming back, thanks for visiting us again. I'm really excited about this particular portion of this 3-part series because I think it's the team, the executive team. It's the team that business owners are most familiar with. There's a lot of work to be done in this team. And I think that this is actually going to be the hardest of the 3 episodes to put into action for a lot of business owners. So I'm excited to dig in and to help facilitate some new thinking and some changes. So with that, without further ado, I'll get right into it. We think that there are 5 really big challenges. There are a lot of daily challenges that executive teams deal with, but there are 5 really big challenges that executive teams must face in their quest to be exceptional. And the very first of those challenges is composition. And, when you think about a business owner starting a business, they're surrounded by people they're comfortable with. They're surrounded by cheerleaders and champions of their vision. And those people tend to get placed in a seat because they're comfortable, they're cheerleaders and champion, they're behind the vision and the idea, but not always placed in a seat because of specific qualifications or their capability to be an alternate perspective and support critical thinking throughout the business development piece. And so, taking the time as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, and as a leader to think about what does this team really need and how do I, find a home for my friends, my champions, the people that are enthusiastic about building this vision, but filling my executive team with the right people, the right skills, and the right perspectives in each of those critical chairs is really important. And I think that it's something that doesn't get as much attention, especially in younger or closely held private businesses, as it could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. My tag on to that is that one of the challenges that founders of businesses have is the tendency to surround themselves with people who think similarly to them. And a high-functioning executive team is composed of people who don't think alike. They are certainly unified in terms of vision and mission and all of those purpose-related things and values and things like that, but they're their perspectives and their temperaments are diverse. And that's challenging. And the other thing that's challenging is for a business owner to surround themselves with executives who are smarter than they are in their areas of expertise. So that kind of ties into challenge number 2, which, in addition to the composition of your executive team, getting them in the right seat on the bus, the role matching dimension, is the second challenge. Not everyone is right matched, first of all, to be an executive. And if they are right matched to being an executive or to growing into being an executive, if they get the necessary training and mentoring in order to step into an executive mindset and skill set, the question still remains, which executive role are they best matched to excel in and contribute through? So this is another challenging decision for business owners to wrap their heads around. And if you have founded a business, you already know in your heart that you can do it better than any place you've worked for up until starting your own business. However, there are many ways to achieve your vision. And even though you can do a lot of things better than were done in your prior employment, it isn't going to help your business grow if you remain the chief cook and bottle washer, if you're trying to do everything that you can do well. There's an old saying you may have heard, just because I can doesn't necessarily mean I should. Maybe yes, maybe no, but that's part of the honesty that's really important for business owners to go through. And we'll go into a little more detail on this with some of the upcoming challenges. But the last thing I'll say for now is that a lot of business owners just don't fully understand the importance of each seat that is necessary for a thriving executive team, and we'll go into details about that, and connected with that, what each seat requires of that particular executive.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. A lot of my entrepreneurial colleagues and friends are of the mindset none of us really care about titles, right? And so, we don't want to necessarily be like, oh, I started the business, I have to be the CEO. But in having that mentality, and this being, my third startup, what I realize is you're kind of shortchanging yourself. There's a difference between respecting a role for the job function that is required and being super title conscious. And all of these roles, exist for a reason. And the key executive team is, there's very specific expectations and requirements that the business has of the people that are fulfilling those roles. If you think about it, the CEO has to be the flag bearer of the vision. The CEO is required to be able to be looking, 5-10 years into the future and questioning all the time, where are we headed and what can get in our way? And leading the rest of the team in that strategic vision standpoint and orchestrating the rest of the people around them to achieve it. And so, you think about that, the skills of a CEO, visionary for sure, great team facilitator for sure, and good at taking a lot of feedback from a lot of disparate sources and translating it into momentum. A CEO doesn't necessarily have to be a great tactician. And so, that's one of the great things to think about as you're looking at the rest of these roles. Before I go further, Doctor, you were going to say something?
Yeah, just an add-on about purpose-based businesses and where are we heading. In a purpose-based business, the other question that's asked, and that people stay connected with is, why are we heading there? Not just where are we heading, but how is our direction that we're heading in serving our highest vision, our highest sense of purpose for being a business in the first place? And oftentimes people don't devote time to the why question, or sufficient time to the why question, and they don't return to the why question often enough, in my experience.
That's a huge point. And that we that is encapsulated in the why isn't given a lot of credence either. You think about it, that we, when a CEO is answering the why question for us means shareholders or stakeholders, it means employees, it means customers, it means vendors. Everybody has to be a part of that answering the why, and it has to make sense for each of them, because without that, nobody's going to fall behind your banner with passion, with enthusiasm, with the heart and pride to achieve it.
And if you don't know how to have those why discussions, then bring in a facilitator to facilitate those discussions among your executive team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, there are a lot of opportunities as we're talking through all of this. There are a lot of things that you may need to bring somebody in to facilitate and show you the first time. When later in the session, when we talk about strategy versus tactics, how to actually execute and how to guide tacticians and operators versus how to guide strategists, all of those things, some of these concepts, we're familiar with the words, but the actions may be very complex in some of the things we're talking about. And there are always going to be specialists who can help you get the ball rolling. And so that's a really good point. I'm going to fly through some of the other executives very quickly, just so you get an idea. There's always going to be a stability executive, somebody with a role like chief sustainability officer. That's the type of person that looks at ESG planning. They look at compliance, they look at financial integrity, but they also look at stewardship. Change executive, chief revenue officer, or something like that, a director of R&D. They'll typically be somebody that facilitates the bridge between the engineers and the salespeople, whether that's an actual R&D department coordinating with a marketing division to make sure that what they're researching has a market and that they understand how to sell it, that type of thing. But a role that's coordinating new product development with placing those products into the marketplace. I like this one. Dr. Gruder called it a doing executive. And that's the chief operations officer. This is a role that I always jump into when I have the ability to be an executive, because it's the guy that bridges the gap, or gal, between strategy and tactics. You have to be able to get into the analytical weeds and say, how do we make this plan work functionally in the day-to-day grind of running our business? And how do we make it efficient? But you also have to be able to talk with the visionaries and the strategists and deal with those why questions, but turn those why answers into how answers. And so the chief operations officer is usually the right-hand person to the CEO, and they're really working in tandem, making vision action. Chief integrity officer, this is one that is becoming more and more commonplace in the executive stack. Historically, in the old, the old generation of, I'm the boss, you do what I say, integrity really wasn't something that came up a lot in many companies. But nowadays, especially with ESG and with, the changing dynamics of workforce expectations, business integrity is critical. It's essential. And then the last one that I would say a lot of young or small business owners don't give enough credence to, but is absolutely critical, is your financial officer. Somebody in that CFO role. I know, and a lot of you will laugh, but I've been in these businesses as well. But a lot of businesses start up with a family member controlling the books, and that's helpful, because it puts somebody in that seat and you know how to talk to them and you can trust them. But unless they're a fully trained financial expert, accounting is kind of witchcraft. They do a lot of math backwards, and it's a weird structure with journaling and with dual line reporting and all of that. If you don't have somebody that is really skilled and proficient in that, you're going to be at risk in paying too much tax. You're going to be at risk in financial controls, and you're going to be at risk of not being able to leverage all of your financial reports to inform operations and strategy.
Mm-hmm. And I want to expand on this a little bit, because the roles that you were just talking about, I think, are very important for executive teams and for owners to understand at a deeper level. And the reason is because what we've seen over the past couple of decades is a whole bunch of very creative sounding chief XXX roles, chief happiness officer, et cetera, et cetera. And my perspective about that is that the reason that we've seen these kinds of novel and different kinds of supposed executive roles crop up is because businesses intuitively recognize that there is something out of kilter about the conventional executive team structure. And what's essentially out of kilter, especially in today's world where we've transitioned from the experience marketplace or economy into the transformation marketplace or economy, is that the composition of an executive team needs to really reflect our fundamental composition as human beings, because businesses are fundamentally people. And there are 5 core archetypes that the roles that Jason just unpacked with you reflect. What I mean by an archetype is templates that capture crucial aspects of what it is to be human. So I want to context the roles that Jason was talking about in a way that I hope will make it easier for you to remember. So think about the image of a big plus sign. So you've got a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. And in the horizontal axis, you have 2 counterbalancing, equally important roles or archetypal energies. One is stability and the other is change. A healthy organization and a healthy executive team needs both. They need an officer who is overseeing the transformation process, and that's what Jason was talking about in terms of a change executive who is overseeing transformational aspects of the organization, such as research and development, marketing, sales, things along those lines. They're really the revenue officer, not the financial officer, but the officer who is always looking at how do you optimize revenues from the right customers, from the right clients. Then the stability officer is the counterbalancing energy of transformation or change in that horizontal axis in the plus sign. And they are responsible, as Jason said, for sustainability, for stewardship, for compliance, for financial integrity. And of course, the chief financial officer may be the stability executive, may be the sustainability officer, or they may report to the sustainability officer, depending on the size of the company and the needs. And then the vertical axis is the beingness, doingness axis. Again, both absolutely crucial. The doingness, Jason covered, is the chief operations officer, translating the goals and intentions and strategy into tactical implementation. And the chief integrity officer is the missing executive that, in my opinion, most of today's creative executive titles are unwittingly trying to fill. And it's because HR got hijacked. The whole original vision of the HR role was to nurture team and individual development in a company. And what HR rapidly acquired or was given was responsibility for compliance, following the rules, sticking to the procedures. And both of those things are really important, but they're very different hats that require very different temperaments, very different mindsets, and very different skill sets. So if you've got a stability executive, they're handling the compliance pieces. The chief integrity officer is handling the team's development as individuals and as a collective, and making sure that at the same time that the reputation of the organization, the business out in the world, is a high integrity reputation, because the customer experience is a superb customer experience. And so if you think about that plus sign again, you've got the energies of beingness and doingness, the chief integrity officer and the chief operations officer. And then in the horizontal, you've got stability and change, the chief revenue officer and the chief sustainability officer. And at the intersection of those four energies of humanness, beingness, doingness, stability, and change is the orchestrator, the CEO, the choice maker about how to utilize the energies of beingness, doingness, stability, and change on behalf of the higher vision and mission of the company. And if you understand this basic architecture of human beings and architect the design of your executive team around these five core archetypes of beingness, doingness, stability, change, and choice-making, decision-making, orchestrating, you will have a very tight executive team that covers all the bases that need to be covered, with all of the managers and other people reporting to each of those executives as is appropriate.
I love the way you put that. That's beautiful. Thank you. And at the end of the day, if you really think that you're going to hire better candidates by calling your chief marketing officer the master sensei to the sales ninjas, that's great. Have fun with it, but make sure that beneath those fun titles is clarity of purpose, clarity of functionality, and a true understanding throughout the organization of what they're responsible for. Mm-hmm. I continue to be a person who doesn't care about titles, but I respect the needs of the business. And I think that's where we need to be. And I really like the way that you broke that down for us, Doctor. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing, moving right from that into the next level of beingness versus doingness, we've got to talk about this idea of tactical versus strategic thinkers. And, to be clear, a lot of people that start their own business because they're extraordinary tacticians. And that's great. That's great that you can do functionally better than anybody you've worked with. And that's why you think you should do it yourself. But recognize, if you're a great tactician, recognize your tactical prowess and get yourself partnered with a strategist. And, the thing that we're talking about here, this beingness versus doingness, strategy is the vision. Strategy is designing the sandbox in which you'll play and determining where you're headed, pointing the bus in the right direction, all these analogies. Tactics are actually turning those plans into action. And you need to have an executive team that is skilled in both. And there aren't a lot of individuals that are exceptional at both simultaneously. They take a different perspective. They take a different mindset. And if you are good at strategic planning, but you find yourself, like I do, getting into the weeds of the how does this happen, all of that energy that you spend thinking about the tactical elements of implementing a strategy are taking you away. They're bringing your attention down into the business and taking your attention away from looking above the business. And so myself, being a person who loves to dig into the weeds, I love to get an idea and then put my head down and tacticalize it. I just made that word up. But I need visionaries around me to help keep focused on that big picture. There always has to be somebody with their head up looking around.
Mm-hmm. And just to underline that, it's not that strategy is superior to tactics or tactics are superior to strategy. They require each other. And where I've seen executive teams get gridlocked is when you have executives who are strategists trying to have conversations, strategic conversations with executives who are tacticians, or executives who are tacticians trying to have tactical conversations with executives who are strategists. In larger companies, I have come to advocate the separating out of a larger C-suite into a strategic suite, an S-suite, and a tactical suite, a T-suite, so that the strategists can talk amongst each other and then share, obviously, with the tacticians what they've come up with for the tacticians to translate into tactical decision-making, tactical planning, procedures, resources needed, et cetera, sequencing, et cetera, et cetera. And the tacticians need to be able to talk among each other and to then report back to the strategists about where the holes are, where the refinements need to be in the strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So there is definitely communication between the strategists and the tacticians, but I see gridlock happening over and over again when those two types of mindsets and roles are trying to have conversations with each other that aren't going to work. Like I said, that kind of conversation is a strategist talking to a tactician about strategy, or a tactician talking to a strategist about tactics.
Yeah, and it's super critical when you start recognizing these two camps of experts and leaders within your executive team, and you start moving forward with letting them embrace their best capabilities within the organization. It's important to then, when you come together, agree on the outcomes, because where this gridlock happens is the strategists want to be done when they have a strategic plan. And the tacticians want to be done when they can visualize how to implement that plan. And there's a feedback loop there, right? The strategists will come up with a plan they feel good about. The tacticians will take that and say, okay, let me work with it for a minute. They'll come back and they'll say, okay, here's what we've got. Here are where we're seeing the holes in it. And the strategists will say, okay, we can deal with those holes, but we don't like this thing tactically. And so when you're meeting together and when you're crossing that border, it's important to say, okay, is this an overview discussion where we're getting the first framework that the tacticians can then go develop a plan with? Are we presenting a tactical approach and getting feedback, or are we trying to finalize our go forward plan? And if you have those understandings of what type of conversation we're having, we can facilitate a lot more success.
Very, very important. And I feel the need to emphasize one part of that, which is that the trap of the strategist is to wait too long to turn strategy over to tacticians. And the trap of the tactician is to try to move into tactical implementation before the strategy is clear. So This is where the collaboration between strategists and tacticians and the understanding of sequencing between those two functions is really important. Strategy precedes tactics. That doesn't make it more important than tactics. It's a sequencing issue. Two equally important things. Sequencing wise, strategy comes first, tactics comes second. And executive teams forget that.
Yeah, and tacticians always want to just go. I mean, I'm guilty of that all the time. I'm like, I get the concept. Let's go.
Sure. It's very human. Cool.
So why don't you kick us off into challenge 5, and then we'll start building some success here, Doctor.
Let's do that. So just as a quick review, the first challenge was composition of the executive team. The second was role matching, making sure that each person on the executive team is in their best role. The third challenge is architecture. How are you structuring the selected roles in the executive team? The fourth challenge is strategic versus tactical thinking. And the fifth and final challenge we wanted to illuminate around executive team development is constantly becoming who your business needs you to be. You know, the heart of executive development is that your business, if it continues to grow, if it continues to move forward, what your business is going to require of each of your executives is supposed to evolve. It's supposed to change. And sometimes there are executives that are brilliant with startups, for example, but they're not brilliant with scaling, and vice versa. There are some executives who are brilliant at scaling, but they're not really brilliant at startups, et cetera. Those are just a couple of examples of what I mean. And no harm, no shame, no fault, no blame. There are certain people who want to continuously grow and want to continuously become who the business needs their role to be as the business grows. That's fine if you have that temperament. If you don't, it's important to know when the business has outgrown your way of filling a particular role. And I think a really important warning story about that is the founder of Uber. So the founder of Uber clearly had a huge hand in developing Uber into a really large, viable, profitable business. And his mindset was a founder's mindset. It was an early stage CEO kind of mindset. And as Uber continued to grow, what it needed its CEO to be capable of doing exceeded what Uber's founder had either the capacity to do or the willingness to do. I don't know which of the two it was. It might have been a combination of both. But the bottom line was that the board finally said to Uber's founder, either become who Uber needs you as the CEO to be now in its development, or get out of the way. And when Uber's founder did not do that, not only did the board remove Uber's founder from the CEO role, the damage that the founder was doing, in the board's opinion, was significant enough because Uber had outgrown that founder's capacities, that the board bought Uber's founder out and completely removed the founder from the business altogether. Didn't just remove him from the CEO role. So that's a warning story about how important it is to constantly become who your business needs you to be, or to recognize that it's time for you to get out of the way out of a particular role. For a CEO, what getting out of the way might be is moving out of CEO into chairperson of the board and bringing in a CEO whose skill set is more properly aligned with what the business needs the CEO to be able to do at this point in its development.
Yeah. And that's, it's such an important point. And this is, this gets back to what I said in the very beginning of sometimes this is really hard work. And, for any founder of any business who's put their heart and soul into that business, it's really hard work to say, you know what, I'm not the steward that's going to drive this business to its next level of potential and make the necessary changes. That is challenging work, but it's important work. And there are a lot,
work, and it's something not to do in a vacuum. This is where advisors are very, very important, and facilitators and mentors.
Yes. And a strong team, having having a board you trust. The executive team isn't just the operational executives. There's always the advisory board that is part of, a part of this decision-making and understanding process. The trusted advisors team that we talked about last session, are great voices, and they're close enough to the business that they understand what's going on, but they're arm's length enough that they can sometimes make less emotional assessments of how the team's doing. And so this leads us right into, how do we take this information, which, I think for a lot of people, some of this information is new information, right? How do we take this and start translating it into success for our business? And, I think that the first step is going to be something that you'll hear from me often. And that is, get educated, get clear-eyed, and get, a fact-based, operations-based understanding of where you're at. And, there are assessment tools that can be utilized to do that. There are all of the stakeholders that we've talked about, the 3 teams that make your business successful over the long haul, as well as your, as well as your board of directors that you can talk to. You can start taking in the voice of your employees, the voice of your customers, and voice of your vendors, but get as much information as you can, distill this information with your team, and get clear-eyed about, are we all as leaders the right people for the seats we're sitting in? Are we executing the demands of our role? And does some reshuffling need to be taken into account, or does some retraining need to be taken into account? Just because you're not, when you make an assessment the very first time and you establish that baseline, if you're not performing at the level of need of your business, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to step away. If you can get there, if you can bring in a mentor, if you can bring in a coach, if you can educate yourself and get there, that's great. Let's do it. Sometimes it will mean, hey, I've been sitting in the CEO role forever, but I'm a lot more of a tactician. Maybe I should step to the COO role, just take a step aside and put a strategist into that CEO role, and let's see how much more our business can do. And so getting clear-eyed in that assessment is step one always.
Mm-hmm. And step 2 is kind of implied or built into what you were saying, Jason, which is that doing that, getting that education, doing clear-eyed assessments, making really informed decisions about these things usually requires an external executive team development consultant.
Yep. And if you can't, if you don't even know where to look for that, you can always reach out to the doctor and I, but your trusted advisors will be another resource to find those people. Mm-hmm. And then, the next step in this, transitioning into a more successful executive team is recognizing that your C-suite doesn't have to be the sole decision-making body. We've alluded to this a lot, but if you, the people that have helped you get to where you are, your friends, your colleagues, your cheerleaders and champions aren't necessarily the right people for these executive roles, there are other roles you can take to still drive the trajectory of the business and guide success. You may want to be more in an operational standpoint and take a management or a functional role in the business itself and leave all that obnoxious executiving work to people who enjoy it. Or you may want to take a seat on the board and guide from a little bit more of an arm's length. And, even if you have a seat on the board, you could still be in operations, you could still be working, but just not sitting in that C-suite. And so understanding that there are, all kinds of different roles within an organization where you as a founder or, you as an executive can still guide and lead and have a voice, even if when you take that clear-eyed look, you're like, right now I'm not the best person for the CEO role. There are a ton of other roles that are equally important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And what you're really talking about is a formula or an approach to not falling into the trap of management by crisis. We're really talking here about being proactive rather than reactive. And then the final piece of the roadmap in terms of looking for a solution is take to heart what we've illuminated in this episode about C-suite architecture. I really can't emphasize the importance of that strongly enough. I want to encourage you to re-listen to that segment, to what Jason described about the C-suite architecture roles and the archetypes that those roles correspond with. That plus sign is a visual to help anchor that clarity for you.
Absolutely. And, as always, we like to leave you with a couple takeaways, the nuggets that we thought were the things we'd like you to carry with you after this episode. And, the first little nugget that sticks with me as we were putting this together is that, myself included, business owners and entrepreneurs, historically, we don't come across a lot of business owners who have taken the roles and the formation of their executive team super seriously. When I hear origin stories of, well, why'd you pick this person for COO? And it's like, well, he's been my right-hand man forever. He's my buddy. He was my first employee. And so he's sitting next to me. I'm the CEO. I founded the company, and my first employee is the COO, and he's doing whatever I say. That's great. And I love the loyalty. I love the respect that is inherent in how most, smaller business, privately held companies put together their leadership structure. But a little bit more thought, a little bit more diligence in creating those executive teams can literally mean millions more dollars in your retirement and a lot more success and fun in the future of your business.
Yeah, what you're describing is non-blood relative nepotism, and nepotism notoriously implodes a business. Yeah,
indeed.
Cool. Second takeaway, we've really emphasized this quite a bit in this episode already, so I'm just going to review this as a reminder or as underlining, which is don't assume that just because you founded your company that your role should be, even in the beginning, or if it was, that it should always remain being the CEO. This is a really hard pill for a lot of founders to swallow. But if you're truly a servant leader to your business and you're truly dedicated to allowing your business to grow and to helping your business grow, then it's important to stay awake about that decision making.
Yeah. And following right in line with these takeaways, it's, don't automatically assume that you're going to populate your executive team with your family and those friends of yours that are like family. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it makes sense. You've got somebody, you've got somebody that you trust, they're extremely skilled, and you've already been through conflict with them and know that you can disagree in a productive way. If you can say all those things, then yeah, maybe that family member or close friend is a great executive for your team. Mm-hmm. But if you can't say those things, especially the conflict piece, if you haven't experienced those and you can't say definitively, this is the strongest person that I can think of for this role, and I can disagree productively with them, then really take pause. Think long and hard before you make that decision, because it's not just a business decision at that point.
Mm-hmm. And final takeaway is that if you want to do a deep dive into C-suite architecture and into really understanding how the perspectives and the mindsets and the temperaments of each of your officers, your executive team need to be different from each other so that everyone can appreciate each other's differences rather than get gridlocked in power struggles over who's right and who's wrong, then I would strongly, even if this sounds self-serving, I would encourage you to read the book, The Nimble C-Suite, which I co-authored with Mark S.A. Smith.
Yeah, and I have no bird in the hunt on this one, but I will say I've read it. It's a powerful book. It's an easy read. I'm fully behind y'all taking a look at that. And with that, on behalf of Dr. Gruder and myself, thank you so very much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this time as much as we do. Please do consider subscribing if you're using any of the podcast services. Leave your comments in the comment section. We will be leveraging all of you and your input to build this podcast. And so we want to make sure that it's valuable and meaningful to you all. So please feel free to jump in the conversation anytime. All our contact information is readily available on LinkedIn or on our website, blueskyadvisors.net. We'd love to hear from you. And if you ever need support, we're here to support you.
That's all for this episode of Boosting Business Value. May your new learning result in the smoothest and most profitable exit strategy for your business. With the right knowledge and guidance, the sky's the limit to what you can do. Do not miss an episode by subscribing to the show. And if you want to learn where your business currently stands, we also have free key opportunity assessments. Find all of them at blueskyadvisors.net/podcast. Thank you for joining us. See you on the next one.